So our theme for today, the big banner, how to enhance leadership skills in this new world of work. And what's important there for us is placing this new world of work inside of the larger context that we're all living in, which is, massive complexity and ambiguity and uncertainty and rapid change and all of that which we understand in such a visceral way. And the funny thing is this has actually been there for all of us before COVID. Michelle and I used to talk about this in our workshops all the time, right? This VUCA world and this volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world. And this is how we're leading and this is how we're living. But it was really only when COVID hit that we looked at each other and we're like, I don't think we even understood what we were talking about. Like now we know what we're talking about kind of deep in our bones. And we know that if we were seeing you on screen, you would be nodding as well, because we know that you know this in a different way. And so does every single person on the planet today. So that's the reality that we're living inside of. And, at times previous to this, where things were simpler methods, simpler ways of leading, simpler processes and structures would have worked. Not always the best, but would have worked. But today, you cannot be in the game with any kind of, simple thinking. We need to be able to think and engage and understand ourselves and other people in much more dynamic, complex, interrelated, diverse ways. So that's sort of what's living all around this new world of work. And the piece that's really most important is that the future is emerging, right? And it has always been emerging. We've never been able to really predict and know the future, but we used to live like we could or worked like we could. And now we know we can't. And that's that added level of uncertainty that we just have front and center, is that we don't know what is around the corner. And so given that, when we think about leadership skills in this new world of work, they have to be skills that we're cultivating right now that are going to help us navigate whatever it is, however unpredictable things might be in coming our way. So we've pulled out 3 core skills. There are many, right? There are many for sure, but these are ones that we've pulled out that we think are significant right now for any one of us as human beings, and definitely as leaders, to be growing and deepening and strengthening. So adaptability, which is going to be our focus this morning, we cannot be in this current reality with this emerging future without strengthening our adaptability muscles. We have to be able to be agile, change direction, let things go, be open to new ways and new perspectives and ways of thinking. So this is, just kind of an entry point for all of us today. It's essential. So that's going to be our focus this morning. Nurturing motivation and engagement is essential for all of us, and it has always been, and it's always top of the list of managers, directors, leaders, wanting to learn more about. So it's not that is new to you, but it's essential in this time because we have to have our people awake at the wheel, present, engaged, motivated, wanting to go that extra distance, wanting to stay, contribute. And we know this is such an issue, right? The whole language of the Great Resignation, you're probably all feeling the pain of that, of people leaving and just what it takes to recruit and bring new people on. It's a major pain point, obviously, in all industries at all levels right now. And people are leaving not just for new jobs, but they're leaving without even having anything lined up. So nurturing motivation and engagement is essential right now, given the context and given this emerging future. And we're going to be doing a breakout on that this afternoon with a bit of a different way into thinking about motivation and engagement that we think will make a really big difference. And then finally, boosting your team culture, right? The culture that you are in, your team, your department, your organization, right, is the container for, everything that happens. If we think of culture as the water you swim in, what is the quality of that water? And in order to be, operating in this time, in this new world of work, we need cultures where people trust each other, where they can have hard conversations, where they can support each other, where they can leave their identity and their egos at the door and really embrace, who's there and what's needed. So boosting your team culture isn't a focus for us today, but there are a number of great speakers today who are going to be looking at culture from different perspectives. And we really encourage you to think about those and just make that connection between culture and this new world of work. And before we just go into adaptability, hand it back over to Michelle, I'm just going to say one more thing, which is that these skills that we're talking about are adaptive skills, meaning that they are skills that you need to grow in yourself in a deep way, right? They're not technical skills where you can just read a book quickly or an article and you just have them like a switch that you turn on. These are skills that you need to actually look deep inside yourself for. You need to engage and practice with them. It might feel uncomfortable. It might feel like you're stretched. You might feel confused. And those are all good signs to tell you that you're in the right place. So if you're feeling that way today, just stay in the game, ask questions. We're around today, other great speakers that you're going to be able to engage with, but just make this material relevant and useful to yourself. So Michelle?
Okay, over to me.
Yeah.
So, we're bringing you adaptability, and I don't know if some of you are groaning in and around adaptability, because I know for myself, after the past couple of years, I'm thinking, really, could I adapt even more? I've never been so adaptable in my entire life. I'm having to change every 2 seconds. I'm ridiculously adaptable at this point. So why are we talking about adaptability? We are all adaptable. Human beings are the most adaptable animal on the planet. So why on earth are we talking about it as the core skill for the new world of work? Well, it's not going away, number one. And number two, a core piece of it is that at least for the past 2 years, it's kind of been happening to us. And it really has been drawing on our systems, right? Like there is that place of burnout, mental health, all that kind of having to shift so quickly all the time, be adaptable all the time, right? Has been really, really difficult and challenging. So even though we can do it, and even though as human beings throughout time, evolution, we've adapted, we can do it, it doesn't tickle. It hurts. And so what we're putting a stake in the ground for is that this isn't going away. Our world is changing faster and faster and faster. We're going to need to be even more adaptable. And rather than that lead to intense burnout and various mental health issues, but from having to shift all the time, we're talking about growing that muscle to be a little bit more intentional about it. Because when we can be a little bit more intentional about it, when we can grow those things, we actually have the opportunity to be in charge of that adaptability as opposed to it, taking over us, right? We have more, we have it as opposed to it having us, if that makes sense. So it's really, really a core piece of what we're going to need as we go forward. And why does that matter to you, for leaders, for your businesses? Well, if you don't adapt, you're out of the game, right? There are businesses that are now gone, businesses that we thought would never ever disappear, that have disappeared specifically because they couldn't adapt. So think of your Kodaks of the world, right? Think of, various I guess Blockbuster. I mean, I don't think we thought Blockbuster would last forever, but Blockbuster just wouldn't move with the times. They just weren't listening, and they were stuck, and they were narrow. So your business is at risk. But also as leaders, this is what people want from you. They want openness. They want adaptability. They want empathy. All of those things can't come from a narrow mindset. They need to come from that more adaptable mindset. And so that's what leaders are being tasked with more and more. So it's important to grow this muscle. So we want to start thinking about adaptability as an intelligence. So, you all know IQ, you've all heard of EQ. I'm guessing as HR leaders, we all know about EQ. And now there's something that they're talking about called your adaptability quotient. And in fact, Tamar and I are certified in an assessment that's specifically around your adaptability quotient. And it comes with like a billion different pieces that make up your adaptability quotient. Some are a little bit more fixed and innate. Some are more systemic. And then there's some that they call abilities that are ones that we can grow and nurture. And we've pulled out 3 that we think are really, really important for today. We want to dip into them a little bit. We're going to have a little bit of interaction around them in terms of reflection, things like that, just so you guys can get it in your bones a little bit. But just quickly, what those 3 abilities we're talking about in terms terms of how they impact your adaptability muscle. Those three are mindset, unlearn, and mental flexibility. So mindset in terms of how does the way you see things, how you approach things impact your ability to adapt. Unlearning, your ability to let go and disregard old information or information that's not relevant anymore, and make room for new things, which is where mental flexibility comes in, that ability to welcome in new information, maybe opposing information, information that maybe you don't even agree with, right? That welcoming in and that mental flexibility. So we're going to dip into that a little bit more. Anything to add, Tamar, before we move on to the next slide?
No, I think that was great.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's dig in.
Okay, perfect. All right. So as you said at the beginning, really make this session useful for yourself. Bring this towards yourself. Think about how it relates. We're going to have a question for you to reflect on as we go through these different pieces, but just make notes for yourself. And, something like mindset, you will have thought about before, potentially come across this idea, but beginner's mind, listen for new things in new ways at this moment. So mindset is at the heart of adaptability. It's the lens that you look out at the world through. You don't realize you're holding that lens most of the time, right? Until you really, really become aware and meet mindset and understand it. We're usually blind to the mindset that we hold. And this lens shapes everything that we notice, that we think, that we feel, and ultimately how we act and behave, right? Our behavior doesn't come from nothing. It doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's an extension of how we're seeing, how we're thinking, how we're feeling. So we need to be able to know the mindset that we're in to be able to engage in adaptability, because not all mindsets are created equal. There's lots of people talking and writing about mindset out there. There's different language around models, but the work of Carol Dweck is really foundational for us, and she talks about fixed and growth mindset. Fixed mindset is our default mindset. Left to our own devices, we tend to live in a fixed mindset. It's certainly where we go under stress, or when we are feeling out of our comfort zone, right, off our game. Our fixed mindset tends to be quite black and white, right or wrong, right? It's got a rigidity to it, and it has a real problem focused. It's looking only for what's wrong, what's not working, and so there's blame that tends to live there. There's stress, there's anxiety that lives there. Right. So just know your fixed mindset. What does it look like and feel like for you when you are in that mindset? And this is human. We are all in this many times a day. Growth mindset, on the other hand, right, contrasted with fixed, right? If the fixed is more problem focused, growth is more possibility focused, right? Growth sees the complexity. If fixed mindset is black and white, growth mindset is much more nuanced. It's able to see the gray. It's able to hold dissonance. It's able to understand and appreciate that things can be hard and we still can stay in the game, right? We're not trying to get out of it being hard. We're not trying to fix something. We're actually able to sit with what's happening and think about, okay, so what now? Given the givens, what now? What next? So you can hear in that adaptability it can only exist in a growth mindset. We can't be adaptable in a fixed mindset. It's like the antithesis of a fixed mindset. So, we're going to go back and forth in talking about growth mindset, but using the language of adaptability mindset as well, because that's the mindset we need to be in. What's essential here is that as human beings, we hold both. We are going to be in both. When we are stressed, we are going to go to fixed. It's not about not being there, but it is about getting very connected to when I am there, what the limitations are. And if I am wanting to adapt, how do I grow? So with any of the challenges and problems that you're dealing with in your work, right? If, take hybrid teams, anything that's relevant right now, right? When you come at it with a fixed mindset, it's going to be, what can I do? You're going to be looking at that through this lens of, what's good, what's bad, what do I know, what do I not know, and get stuck in there. Whereas growth mindset is going to open up your curiosity, your engagement, your willingness to step outside of your comfort zone much more. So we want you to think about yourself here. and this idea of an adaptability mindset. And the first question, we'd love you to put your thoughts into chat. What gets in the way for you of being in an adaptability mindset, in that growth mindset? What gets in the way? And another way to think of it is what keeps you in a fixed mindset. So pop into chat. What gets in the way or what's hard of being in an adaptability mindset? Initial feeling of overwhelm for sure. Lack of energy. Yeah. When you're tired and you're depleted.
Yeah, I was just thinking that tired.
That is hard.
Opinions of others. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a real honest one. Actually making the change.
And when you're used to it being one way, again, it's just the fixed mindset is we want to keep doing what we know, right? Because it's comfortable, it's safe for us. So it's hard to let go of that and be open to something new. Knee-jerk reaction for sure.
Fear of change. Yeah, it's all those reactivity pieces, Tamar.
Yeah.
Holding your own opinions too strongly, thinking you are right. Yeah. Oh, I love these. I love how vulnerable everybody's being. That's awesome.
Yeah. And thinking you're right, again, the language of right, wrong, right? It's like, if I'm right, other people are wrong. If they're right, then I'm wrong. It's very black and white and it's very narrow. Okay, great. Great. And feel free to keep putting those in.
Yeah.
We also want to know what helps you be in a growth mindset or an adaptability mindset. What makes a difference? What helps you go there, stay there?
Oh, yeah. Time to think. Absolutely.
Yeah. Space for sure. Doing what you love. Talking with someone. Collaborating. Yeah.
Telling myself it's for my benefit. Yeah. That's the purpose piece. Things you can't control. You can adapt accordingly. Love it.
Calling out people. Yeah.
Oh, Lynn, that's great.
Growth mindset allows you to call out that imposter syndrome because it's vulnerable to do that, to notice that you're thinking that way, to notice that you're feeling that way. But there's something very powerful and courageous when you do that, where you know you're in growth mindset to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Right. Fixed mindset is much more protective, right? And keeping you safe, away from those situations, away from those feelings, all of that. Reflection. For sure. So a lot of this is hard. Everyone is so busy. There's so much on the plate. There's so much change. It's hard to imagine, having the space to reflect, to think. And yet we see here that it's essential, right? So how do you find that space and time to have the conversations that people are talking about, to do that own inner reflection? Because that it helps you tap into that adaptability mindset. And if adaptability is essential for this time, for leading in this new world of work, then we need to get really serious about how we build those times in, those moments in, those actions in, that allow us to shift from that fixed to that growth mindset.
Just to add there for a second, I'm just noticing, and we talk about this all the time, you and I, Tamar, that speed is really our enemy, and yet our culture is getting faster and faster and faster. And so, isn't that an interesting conundrum? And I'm just aware that Gabby Fish, who's on the call, Gabby, just give us a thumbs up or something. I know she's here. She posted something yesterday on LinkedIn. She always posts great articles. She's a colleague of ours and another coach, about slower productivity, and that we need to start embracing this idea of slow productivity, of this approach of just kind of slowing things down. And it was a really good article and really, really interesting to have that place of just kind of slowing stuff down, because we actually can't be in a growth mindset without that space. And a lot of you mentioned that, those moments of pause, reflection, etc. And so we're going to have to be really, really, really intentional about that, even more so. So anyway, I just wanted to add that in because I had Gabby's article running in my head about that. Okay, so next ability. Yes, Gabby. Everybody's cheering you, Gabby. Hooray. Other people read your article too. Isn't that nice to know? Like, you post things on LinkedIn and you don't know if anybody's reading anything, but they are. Look, you're getting claps and everything. Okay, next one. Unlearn. Okay, so this ability of unlearning, if anyone else is as obsessed with Adam Grant as Tamar and I are, you will know or have heard of Unlearn. He talks a lot about rethinking and our need to let go of, you know, some of our best practices, some of our thinking, and to be constantly reassessing our thinking. And in order to adapt, we constantly need to be in this process of reflecting and reassessing our skills and letting go of old ideas when they're not relevant anymore. It's this real balance of bringing in new info and disregarding old data. And so this is a key piece. And you probably all think, yeah, I do that. Yeah, I think through stuff like that. Yeah, that's not a problem. I do that. Well, here's the thing. It's really, really, really hard when we get down and dirty with it, when we are met with like some of that stuff that you all mentioned in and around fixed mindset. Sean, I think it was you. I'm not sure how you said it. I loved how you said it. It's like, I think it was like that holding on, and you know, to your own ideas, right? It's that kind of feeling of unlearn, and expertise is like one of those ones that really get in the way of unlearning. So, you know, as leaders, we all show up with a certain level of expertise. We've all gotten into these positions because we've been at it for so long, right? And so we really, really know what we're doing. And then we're hit with these new conundrums or new challenges or new problems, and our old ways of doing things don't match up anymore. But we actually feel useless if we let go of it. We're not even sure of who we are anymore. And so a lot of us don't actually want to unlearn, but we need to do it. And it's something that's really, really hard to do. So we just want to pause for a second and explain as to like the other piece besides your expertise, all those things of why it's hard to do. So, you know, since the moment we were born, we've had data coming at us at all times. At all times. And if we were going to remember every single last little piece of data from the moment we were born to right now, our brains would be messier than they already are. And let's face it, our brains are really super messy right now. So we have to go through this process of selecting data. And so how do we select data? Well, as human beings, we all have this wonderful filtering system or processing box, we like to say, which is our brains, of which we filter information through, which is like, you know, our backgrounds, our cultures, our identities, our various identities, our you know, our past experiences, et cetera, all these different ways that we choose and select data, we filter through to create meaning and assumptions and beliefs. So that is how we're constantly learning. That is how we are constantly coming up with our ideas and our conclusions. It's all getting filtered through that processing box. And that's really, really hard to become aware of. Now, as HR leaders, I'm probably guessing you're all pretty good at that. But let's face it, a lot of the leaders that we work with, a lot of other leaders we know, family, friends, etc., a lot of people aren't aware of the way they're filtering information. They see a piece of data, they make an assumption, and it is 100% truth. We all know people like that. I'm even like that in certain situations. Absolutely. So this process of unlearning, in order to be more adaptable, is we need to be constantly aware of how we're making assumptions. We need to be constantly aware of how our thinking may get in the way of stuff. So in order to be adaptable, we constantly have to be engaged in that process. Is this
And
making
one,
sense?
I'll
Yeah.
just say one
Yeah.
way that we've talked about it before that I think can be useful is, you know, we think about learning as adding, right? We're adding more and more, you know, through what we read, to our experience, all of that. But the unlearning is also the subtracting, right? So what do we need to take away? What do we need to let go of to literally make space for new thinking and new ways of doing things?
So the job here really, in terms of unlearn and growing that muscle, is in and around becoming more and more aware of how you make meaning and the assumptions you make. So we kind of wanted you to tap into that a little bit with our next reflection question, which we're going to have you put into chat. This one might be a little bit more challenging. So when you think about the new world of work, right? Jeff's title for this whole day, when you think about that, what is one assumption you're making that may impact your ability to adapt? And just feel free to put it into chat.
And that new world of work is going to mean different things to different
Mhm.
people. So
It
that's
will be
part of it.
difficult to change. Yes. And you can feel like that right there, it starts shifting in that assumption. It's only me who goes through all this stress. Oh, Olga, I know that one. Others are moving faster. I might not be able to keep up. Hustle culture. Yes, I'm afraid we're going back to hustle culture. Me too. External
And there's going to
forces
be
beyond our
assumptions
control.
about what hustle culture is and why
Mhm.
that, what gets in the way there.
Okay, managing myself and trying to be a role model for my daughter. Yeah. Employees think they have the upper hand. Okay, interesting, Sandra. Yeah, absolutely. So you can start hearing how, we can start getting in and unpacking all of those things in terms of our learning, but it's really important to think, okay, where might thinking like that, where might assumptions like that get in the way of our ability to adapt to this new world of work? So we just wanted to kind of exercise that muscle a little bit. But let's move on to our last ability. You ready, Tamar?
Yep.
Okay.
Our last piece, and again, we're just touching in on this. There's so much more to say and do with all of these three, but we're just wanting to give you a taste of them. So mental flexibility is really about this openness to new perspectives, appreciating competing demands. So being able to hold dissonance, right? More comfortable with opposing viewpoints. So not just seeing opposing viewpoints, but actually be able to hold them, and that step further of actually being able to see value in them, right? And so part of this mental flexibility is, how, to what extent are you able to change your mind, to see things from radically different perspectives, for being able to invite people to share with you different perspectives that might really shake in a profound way how you see things. That's really what we want to start to get at, because we know that you seek out different perspectives. We know that you talk to different people, but to what extent are they the same people with the same perspectives, or even different perspectives to yours, but you almost can predict and know what those different perspectives are. So in the world of, with DEI, all the work that's happening with DEI is so important for all the reasons of, creating more inclusive, whole cultures where everybody belongs, all of the things that come with that. And it goes hand in hand with mental flexibility, because we need as much diversity as possible at the table. We actually need to shake up our thinking and challenge ourselves and change our minds and let go of old ways of thinking, right? So the unlearn and mental flexibility, they work together well, right? Unlearning is really knowing how you got to your thinking, being able to subtract, make space for new thinking. Mental flexibility is that seeking out of new perspectives that you hadn't thought about or considered before, which in this new world of work is essential because we haven't been here before. So that's our reflection question for you, is for you to just kind of go inward for a second and really think for yourself, how often, to what extent do you seek new perspectives? And we just want to normalize never here, right? Nobody's going to want to pick never. But we want to kind of normalize it, because if you're going to the same people, if you're not going to people, never. If you're going to the same people all the time, it might also be never, right? Just to kind of challenge you to really be a bit dramatic with thinking about, to what extent am I really, deeply, legitimately seeking out perspectives, different enough from mine that it really gives me new ways of thinking. That is uncomfortable to do. It is hard to do it. It is not our normal, natural way, right? And it's essential to adaptability. So let's see, do we have anything in chat here?
Sometimes, but not often enough. It's way harder in a virtual setting. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Not enough.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're all guilty of this, especially as things are moving fast, right? We're all guilty. Like, it's just so much easier to go back to the same people we always talk to, that we have on speed dial, proverbial speed dial, and that makes it the easy way to go. But it actually, not only is it problematic, right? It actually gets in the way of our success because we're not going to be able to solve for complexity with the same voices over and over and over again.
Yeah. And this last point here, right? You're exposed to the same echo chamber, right? The algorithms keep pointing you in the direction of the same thinking. So it really does take something. It takes knowing that, being intentional, having resources that kind of allow you to step beyond where you are. And you can see, hopefully, that connection back to growth mindset. When you're in fixed mindset, you're just going to more naturally want to stay with what you know. Growth mindset is what's going to have you be more open, even though it's uncomfortable, to seeking out new perspectives.
I just want to go back to something in the chat that Jennifer put in, just in terms of that there's this real mental fatigue that's out there right now that people are experiencing 100%. And that's going to make this mental flexibility more difficult in some areas. There's some areas that are just hot spots for us, or we don't have the energy to be confronting them or to be open. And Jennifer, I really hear what you're saying, which is, in some ways you're even making our case more so for building these abilities in terms of adaptability, because those are those feelings of actually when it has us as opposed to us having it. And that's where creating space, creating pauses, breathing, all those wonderful things that we want to actually kill everybody when they tell us, but they are true. Eat well, get some sleep, take breaks, have strong boundaries. All those things really, really do help so that we can actually do these things. Because if we leave them unattended and we're just left to like the shoulds of mental flexibility, as we face all this exhaustion, as we face all this fatigue, it is really hard. Adaptability is hard. Like I said at the beginning, which I think resonated with a bunch of you in terms of it not tickling, like it hurts. It really hurts. So, and we're in that place of real exhaustion when it comes to that. So I just wanted to honor what Jennifer had to say, because I think it's a really, really important point before we move on. We want to give you some tips, because everybody loves tips. So we wanted to give you some tips so that you left with something. But before we do that, we kind of thought, are there any questions? Did anyone have anything that they wanted to add, ask, before we go into our tips? Jeff, were there any questions you saw that we missed?
I don't see any in the Q&A box.
Yeah, I don't think I saw any.
Okay.
Okay, no, you could just no questions yet. Perfect. Feel free to raise your hand, everybody, anytime. So, or, I don't know if they can just pull themselves off mute, but we're good with interruptions. Okay, should we go to our first tip, Tamar?
Yes. Okay, so of course there's going to be many tips, but we wanted to hone in on what we thought was most important. So this question, what's the opportunity or the possibility, is an open, curious question. It's a question that lives at the heart of the work of Marilee Adams. I don't know if you guys have come across her. She wrote this book, Change Your Questions, Change Your Life. That's sort of a culmination of her life's work. She's an academic, really smart, amazing woman. Lots of YouTube videos where her mindset model is not fixed in growth, it's judger and learner. And so she talks about questions that live at the heart of our mindset. The judger questions keep us in a judger mindset or a fixed mindset. Questions like, what's wrong? Who's to blame? Why me? What now? All of that. Versus learner questions are what shift us into that growth mindset or that adaptability mindset. Questions like, what's the opportunity or possibility? What's needed? What's next? What's important now? Those are all learner questions. So our tip is to ask this question, and it's to actually understand the power of learner questions. So pick up her book. It's cheap. It's so readable. She writes it as a parable. It's very easy to read. She gives you her model. She's got all kinds of great resources in there. And it's a very tangible piece. It's also a great piece to share with your team, because then you have that shared language. So that would be our mindset tip.
Okay, so unlearn tips. This isn't about self-promotion. You do not have to go with us. There are many fabulous coaches actually here all day long and that you can find on LinkedIn. But unlearning is hard. Assessing your thinking, unpacking your thinking, understand how you make meaning, how you got to your assumptions and beliefs, tearing that apart and thinking about it and deconstructing it is actually really, really hard. You're peeling back that onion on yourself, and it just could use some support. So coaching is an incredible modality for that. We encourage that for people to do that. Whether you do it as an individual, as a team, as a group, it doesn't matter. It's really, really important to reflect on how you make meaning and the assumptions you make, because with that self-awareness, that's the beginning of it all, right? All of the self-awareness. You cannot shift without that self-awareness. Then we have this tool that we put up there called the ladder of inference. Some of you may know this already. Just Google it. It's really, really simple online. There's videos on how to do it. It's a really, really simple tool that helps you kind of break down your thinking. And it takes you from this spot of, okay, what's the data, the neutral data? And then it takes you up each step of the ladder to ask you questions along the way to help you unpack your thinking. So it's a really, really important tool. Write it down, try it out, use it with your teams, use it with friends. It's actually really, really excellent. The insights are super, super excellent. And then the last one is in and around, really it's time to get serious about your assumptions and biases. The past couple of years, there's been so much talk and social upheaval, specifically around people's biases, etc. And it's time to take responsibility. And if you haven't in these past 2 years, this is it. You've got to do this. You need to do this. You need to do this for our world. You need to do this for our teams. You need to do this for your leadership. So go take a course, read a book, do some research. It's time. Get some help. Right? If you're really struggling uncovering those biases, if you really feel triggered and frustrated when people say some things and you're just like, oh, I don't do that. That's not me. It's time. You really need to spend some time thinking about that. Knowing the type of people who are on a call like this and the HR community, I'm sure you're probably all engaged in this, but it's just a really important unlearned tip, even if you were just to take it back to your teams or your leaders that you work with on a daily basis.
And then just one more thing about that is just back to this piece we keep talking about being, intentional. And so this is very much kind of in the world today. We're thinking about these things more. We're talking about them more. But to what extent, is each one of us actually really taking on our thinking, in deep, intentional ways? And that's the piece that's challenging, but that's really the call to action here.
One question just came in. Jeff put a question in. He was wondering if what our thoughts are on starting a network of industry professionals that have been increasing in popularity since the pandemic started, in terms of unlearning. I think that's awesome. I think, if you're not going to get a coach, or if you're going to get a coach and do something like that, I think the more you are challenged to hear new perspectives, the more people can challenge you on how your thinking came to that point. That will be really, really helpful. And so a network of industry professionals, I think, would be awesome. I think it's a great idea. And I think it's great for everybody. We all need more community. And I think it's fantastic to have stuff like that.
And how you set that up, who's there, the kinds of conversations you have need to be intentional around unlearning, because it's also when we have peers and colleagues, it can become sort of the same conversation. So how do we do that with unlearning in mind is amazing. Okay, let's do our last tip. Mental flexibility, if that is really about kind of shaking the world of our own thinking, bringing in new perspectives, a tip is to intentionally find 3 new people. So people you have not currently reached out to now. Someone who thinks like you thinks like you, maybe similar background, still valuable, right? because their perspective still might be different to yours. And that's useful and interesting to see somebody who you think is like you and how they might think differently. Someone who is completely different. Again, just, they think differently, different background, whatever makes sense there. Somebody who is completely different to you as much as you can tell, and someone from a completely different part of the business. So whether you go with these three or you create your own three, the point here is three new people that you haven't spoken to before, that you're intentionally picking with kind of a different focus in mind. Anything else you want to add there, Michelle?
No, well, actually, I will just add one thing. I just was talking with a leadership client who's been doing this throughout his career, and it's been invaluable to him to do that, to constantly have all these different people that he reaches out to, like his own board of directors. And it's actually really, really brave, because sometimes you hear stuff you really don't want to hear.
Yeah. And what's nice,
that takes courage.
What's nice about having this almost as a formula is it takes the thinking out of it. Like it takes the planning out of it, right? So with any conundrum or place that you're stuck, you go into your mode of your three different people at the very least. And that can just get that ball rolling in a way that maybe it's easy to put off otherwise.
Okay, last little piece, Jeff. We are bringing it home. Do not worry. So we just want to put it all together just to connect you to where we've been in this really, really short time. And we really appreciate the engagement you brought, because we know it's not so easy when people are just talking at you with slides up. So just what we really want to send home is that adaptability is essential right now. It's essential for like pretty much forever, let's face it. But we are entering more and more complex times. And it's really, really important for us to grow that muscle so that we are not having it oppressed on us, because we're going to adapt no matter what. So is it going to be with oodles of pain, or are we going to have a little bit more strength as we approach it? There is this idea that you can grow your adaptability quotient. And you can do that through your mindset and the lens that you approach things in. By coming from a growth mindset, or that adaptability mindset will help you to adapt. Letting go of outdated thinking is a key component of that. And of course, welcoming in the new perspectives. All those three will really, really serve. If those are the only three you spend some time on, it will become easier, less painful, and you'll have more success in being adaptable. That's the core piece. That's what your people need from you. That's what your businesses need from you. That's what we all need to be doing right now, as much as none of us want to adapt anymore. And so, that's our show for today. If there's any other questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you.